All right, so welcome everyone. We've just reached the top of the hour and we'd like to be respectful of your time today, so we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome to the webinar on ensuring quality in digital, blended, and online learning. Before we get started today, I'd just like to go over a few quick housekeeping items. There's live transcription available if you'd like to use this feature. You can enable it by clicking on the live transcript button within your Zoom controls, and then you can choose whether you'd like to show subtitle, which will display the captions along the bottom of your screen, or you can view the full transcript, which will display the transcribed text in a sidebar along with timestamps and speaker names. Please note that we have a few different communication tools enabled during the webinar today, and they will serve slightly different purposes. You can use the chat box for general conversation with other attendees. Please note that we are using Zoom webinar today, not the meeting tool, so you'll need to click on the little drop down to make sure that your chat messages are set to go to everyone so that everyone in the room can see the conversation. Just a heads up that the default is set to only host and panelists, so it's easy to get mixed up. Next, you can submit any questions you might have for the presenters within the Q&A tool. You can also like or upvote a particular question that has already been asked. Since we're expecting a large group for this webinar, your questions might get lost if you only post them in the chat. If you don't already have these open, you can access both the chat and the Q&A by clicking on their icons along the Zoom toolbar on the bottom of your screen. And then lastly, there's a collaborative worksheet available. I'll pop that link into the chat, and I'll do a couple more times as we move throughout this session. And this is a place if you'd like to contribute throughout the session by taking notes, sharing and collecting resources, as well as a place to continue conversations even after this live session has ended. All right, so that's it for the housekeeping items. At this time, I'd like to hand the mic over to Dr. Karen Solomon, who's the Vice President and Chief Transformation Officer for the Higher Learning Commission, to give a brief welcome and review today's session agenda. So over to you, Karen. Oops, Karen, you're on mute.
Thank you, Caitlin. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. This webinar is hosted by HLC as a way to help our institutions provide quality assurance wherever and however they're delivering curriculum. And we've been hosting webinars since early 2021. And this is last of our leadership webinars for this winter-spring session. I would like to give a great thanks to the staff at Online Learning Consortium who've been partnering with us. We started this collaboration back in 2020, and it's been a great way for us to work together. And I really appreciate that. I'm going to introduce briefly here in a moment the folks from Online Learning Consortium that will take away the rest of the session today. But I'd like to move on to the next slide and just say thank you to Lumina Foundation, who has been a great supporter for us, and it actually allowed us to repurpose some of our grant funds when the pandemic started so that we could offer the series of webinars and workshops that we've been doing over the last year and a half. So thank you to the Lumina Foundation. At this point in time, I'd like to turn it over to Nicole Weber, who will lead us in introducing today's speakers. Nicole is the Associate Vice President of Learning for the Online Learning Consortium. Take it away, Nicole.
All right, thank you so much, Karen. I'm here with my colleague today, Dylan Barth, who will introduce himself in just a moment. But just want to tell you a little bit about the Online Learning Consortium first. So for those of you who may not be familiar with our work, the Online Learning Consortium is a global nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting the work you do in your institutions to provide quality digital, blended, and online experiences for your students. Each year, we offer conferences and events that center around networking and showcasing the work and strategies higher education leaders and innovators like yourselves are leveraging to reach and teach your students. We also offer a number of programs, certificates, and workshops in our Institute for Professional Development to learn about and apply things like quality online teaching practices, learning sciences and accessibility to teaching, instructional design, and leadership. In addition, we also support researchers sharing their work and white papers around emerging trends in our research center and in our peer-reviewed publication, the Online Learning Journal. Finally, we provide consulting services to institutions who are planning to strategically grow their online programming and support academic programs as they work to ensure quality in the programs they're creating and have created. So for more information on our services, please visit our website at onlinelearningconsortium.org. So with our depth of experience in digital, blended, and online learning, we are very excited to be partnering with the Higher Learning Commission to facilitate the second of the two webinars this month that support the work you're doing in your institutions. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Dylan Barth, our Director of Professional Learning, to tell us about today's session and introduce today's fantastic panelists.
Thank you, Nicole. As Nicole mentioned, my name is Dylan Bartham, the Director of Professional Learning at OLC. You'll also notice that I am wearing a sweater, and you may be wondering why. It's because I'm in Wisconsin, and we haven't hit 40 degrees today yet, so it's a little bit chilly, even though we're almost in May. So it's a little bit frustrating on this end, but we're all here in a nice warm environment, and we're going to be talking about online course quality. And so kind of the context for this, before I have the pleasure of introducing our speakers and panelists, the context for this particular webinar is around during the pandemic, right? We had that emergency remote instruction, that quick pivot. And a lot of instructors really, met that challenge, were very successful. And now we're at a point where we kind of have to move beyond that and think about, well, what are, in terms of online courses and programs, what are some effective practices that institutional leaders can implement on their campuses in order to push the needle right on that online course quality. So we have two great panelists here that I'm going to introduce. The first is Dr. K Shelton. Dr. Shelton is a professor of educational leadership in the Center for Doctoral Studies in the College of Education and Human Development at Lamar University. Previously, as the Dean of Online Education at Dallas Baptist University, she led the development and ongoing operations of their online education programs with over 55 majors and degrees offered fully online. She is certified as an online instructor, teaching online since 1999, and as an online education consultant. Dr. Shelton's education includes an MS in education, emphasizing online teaching and learning from California State University, East Bay, and a PhD in educational leadership, higher ed from the University of Nebraska. Winner of both the Blackboard and e-learning exemplary online course award, she has published over 40 articles and book chapters in the field of online education, including a book entitled The Educator's Guide to Online Education. Dr. Shelton was also awarded a Sloan C Effective Practice Award for her research on the quality scorecard for the administration of online education programs, the John R. Bourne Award for Outstanding Achievement in Online Education, and the NCPEA Morfitt Dissertation Award. Involved with research in online education since 1997, she has spoken at numerous conferences and workshops and advised peer institutions regarding the creation of an online education program and the best practices for teaching online and faculty support. She has also served as an advisor regarding online education programs for several peer institutions. Recently, Dr. Shelton has been involved in the international use of quality scorecard for the administration of online programs, as it has been adopted by institutions in Latin America. She is also an online learning consortium quality scorecard program evaluator and teaches workshops regarding its implementation. As you can tell, we have a great depth of experience and expertise here in Dr. Shelton. So thank you. I'd also like to introduce Janet Smith. Janet serves as the Director of Operations and Communication at the University of Arizona with the Office of Digital Learning. Previously, she managed a multi-tiered and collaborative quality assurance process, including Quality Matters, to ensure that online courses are designed for student success and engagement by working with partners across campus to integrate best practices around course design, copyright, universal design for learning, and accessibility into the instructional design process. She holds multiple roles for Quality Matters and is an active member of the Online Learning Consortium. Jenna received her bachelor's degree in elementary ed from the University of Arizona, her master's degree in educational leadership in higher education from Northern Arizona University, and a graduate certificate in educational technology from Northern Arizona University. So welcome to both of you, and thank you for being here. We're so excited to have you here. You're both wonderful experts in this area, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. So how we'll kind of proceed is we have a few questions, so I'll ask the questions sort of, first I'll ask Kay, and then maybe Janet be able to weigh in a little bit as well. Kind of go back and forth. I'm definitely seeing this as a conversation. And those of you who are in the, attending, please feel free to pop those questions you have into the Q&A area, and we'll get to them as we can, if that sounds good. So, Caitlin, would you mind going to our first, we do have a bit of a poll here. Are you able to get that going for us, Caitlin? Excellent. So how would you describe the quality of most of the online courses at your institution right now? Very good. So we have 14 of 19 who have posted in here. We have the advantage as facilitators of seeing how things are shaken out. All right, Caitlin, it's unclear to me. Are we sharing out the results right now? Are folks able to see that?
I think so. Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, so as you can see, thank you. We have sort of in the quite a bit in the middle here, where and I think it would make a lot of sense for you all to sort of be at this kind of webinar and interested in, well, how can I improve course quality? Feeling like that those online courses are somewhere in the middle, but could be improved. I think, of course, online course quality is so important for student success, and having effective practices and even evaluation instruments in place for this sort of thing. So it seems like you all are in the right place. I will say that the way that this webinar is also framed is in terms of online, blended, and digital learning. And so we're sort of wrapping those together in a little bit. The questions are going to be a little bit focused, and they'll say online courses, but I think this can be readily applied to all sorts of modes that we can engage with. So thank you very much for contributing. And let's move on to our panelist discussion here. So the first question, Kay, if it's okay, I'm going to ask you to answer first, is what are the most important factors for selecting and implementing an online course quality rubric for an institution? And if I could add sort of a sub point to that, it would be related to adapting, making changes to an instrument as well.
Thanks, Dylan. So I've been involved in online education since 1998 and was charged with bringing an institution online very quickly, but there was no research to go to, right? But as I began to do this, the one place that you could start to see some literature was around course quality, not about program quality, but about course quality. So there has been research done, and there's lots of literature on course quality. So one of the first things that I do is I try to explore that research, find out what the best methods are, who's using it, try to get, find out what they're doing. I need to look at the cost of a rubric, if there's a cost associated with it. Do I have instructional designer buy-in? That's really important, because you're going to want your instructional designers to be able to support it and be able to be passionate about it. And then, of course, I work on faculty buy-in, which is going to be another question down the road. But one of the reasons that I developed the quality scorecard for the administration of online programs for the Online Learning Consortium at the program level was because the research that we had was basically on course quality. And so, and the research says you must do this. This is non-negotiable now. We really need to make sure that all of our courses are at least at a baseline standard of some kind of quality level, that we know that what we're putting out with our students is at least the quality that we are wanting it to be.
Great, thank you so much. Janet, what would you like to add?
Yeah, so I would echo a lot of what Kay said, and around first really looking at the context. There's a few sort of big rubrics out there that, as she mentioned, are well researched and readily available at different price points. And so when we began looking at what we were going to adopt in 2015, we were already a Quality Matters campus, but there had not been broad adoption. So we considered the context of what did faculty governance look like on our campus, how much instructional design support did we have, what were the institutional resources, budgetarily mostly, that we could put towards this. And also what was going to be required of us as we looked ahead. We were still about 5 years out from our next accreditation visit, but we knew that we needed, one thing that's changed, I think, in online learning is that it wasn't always a requirement, I don't think, of HLC and other accrediting bodies to have those continuous improvement and quality assurance pieces in place, and now it is. So this is really, as Kay said, not an optional thing. So we started by sort of dreaming big and then breaking that big dream down into small steps of what we wanted quality assurance to look like. So we started with Quality Matters, and then we developed our own rubric that incorporated parts of Quality Matters, the Online Learning Consortium Scorecard, and then Chico State out of the California schools has an excellent scorecard that they also created based off of similar rubrics.
Excellent, thank you. One follow-up question I have for you both is when institutions are thinking about an approach here, there's the course quality piece, right? Where you want to make sure that those courses are of quality and that they're meeting student needs. But there's also an element of certification. And I know that Quality Matters is one of those where it's sort of like you get your stamp of approval, this course is approved or this instructor is approved. How important have you found that sort of certification to be in terms of course, it depends on the campus culture, but how big of a deal does that seem to be as a consideration?
We found that many faculty really, we did our own internal course stamp of approval, as it were, on Quality Matters, just because it was cost prohibitive to put all of the courses through the full review. And we did find that in many instructors, they wanted the stamp. It was sort of a badge of honor. For some of our more competitive faculty, being able to say that they had earned this in their courses was important to them within their department. So yeah, having recognition was important for us.
Yeah, I think anytime you can provide any kind of training around the rubric, I think it's only going to be a better support for faculty buy-in. And one of the things I wanted to say to this question is, and I had in my notes, was that the OLC actually has a review process for the quality scorecard for programs. And the first institution that earned that seal of approval many years ago was an institution, a small institution, Southern Nazarene University in Oklahoma. And they had pulled all of their faculty together and they pulled all the rubrics in that were existing at the same time. And they did something like you said, Janet, where they came to consensus on what their quality rubric was going to look like using all the best practices. And I've never forgotten that, because while I know they're a small institution and that's really easier to do at a smaller level, to me, that was amazing to go ahead and get all that buy-in at the very beginning and have that faculty vested in that rubric. And then also they kind of did a train the trainer kind of model. Once the faculty got trained in it, then they began to train others.
I like that, Kay, because even though, as you say, it's I'm at a large institution, and so it would be hard to do that on a broad scale, but there are certainly pockets of either groups of faculty across disciplines or within certain departments that would love to come together and do things like that. So if, for our attendees, if you are at a large institution, consider that type of targeted buy-in with a group, because it really does ripple out over time. Quality in your online programs and in your online and hybrid courses, it's a long game. And you definitely want to start strong, but also with some immediate wins, and something like that is a good way to do it.
Yeah, Jenna, and talking about the long game too, thinking about in some sort of evaluation instrument itself is not going to be static, right? It's going to be informed by campus needs and by research, as you both are pointing out. And so I think some great takeaways here are really about, seeing what's out there, really trying to focus on what is research-based, so that you really have a, not only is it effective, but then also I think that helps a little bit with buy-in. And mixing and matching as it meets your campus context. So thank you very much for that. Caitlin, would you mind going to the next slide, please? So this is the buy-in question, right? What strategies do you have for getting faculty and instructor buy-in for these kinds of quality initiatives? And I would say this is both at the trying to make improvements at the course level, but then also Kay, your example of trying to bring folks together to just even agree on what might be a good instrument. Janet, do you want to start this time?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I hear most often when I talk about our Quality Matters internal review process that we do is that it's completely based on volunteer instructors who will willingly semester in and semester out give of their time to do an internal review of other courses. And some other folks in our Arizona consortium are just like, how do you get them to do that? And I say, I just ask. I just ask and I offer to pay for their training. If they get really invested in the process, we offer to pay for additional training for them, which is, usually a couple $100 per person out of our budget. And most of them really are interested in getting to peek behind the curtain of somebody else's online course, and they enjoy the discussion. One of the challenges that it sort of runs parallel to teaching online and really parallel to many of our jobs in higher education is we become isolated and we become siloed, as we like to say. And so providing a space where a community can form that is giving peer feedback really has been very motivating to faculty. We are starting to do some more initiatives that have some stipends. I mean, stipends always motivate, absolutely. But really just having a champion who is running the program, having your leadership be supporting it, and getting a few faculty on board who can spread the word about what is happening has been very effective. So I know those are not stunning and unique ways to get buy-in, but they really have worked for us.
Thank you, Janet.
So just to add on to that, so I'm from Texas and we love our Tex-Mex. And one of the things that I used to do was I would make a big pan of chili and cheese enchiladas and have the faculty in for lunch and use that opportunity to share research that was, because I really felt like if I showed them that this is research based and that this is working, or I showed them reflections from other faculty at other institutions about a course rubric and how it improved their online experience, I really felt like I had better buy-in, and I was very intentional with faculty buy-in for everything that I did because I really felt like they could make or break our program. They're our first foot out, right? They're our face to our students. They're our interaction with our students. And so I spent a lot of time with them demonstrating how the rubric could be used, why it's important, how others are using it. I actually just had a doctoral student finish some research. Her name's Teresa Maper, and she actually just did a study on faculty perceptions with a quality course rubric. And she actually found that the faculty really liked the alignment of the course outcomes and the activities and assessments, which is absolutely something that QM starts with. You have to start with your outcomes. They said that it helps students understand what's expected in the course because the rubric typically has you be very intentional in all of your instructions. And then she did find that faculty really needed resources, though, to support the use of that rubric, such as instructional designers and technical personnel to be able to help support that process. And then faculty really liked it, that it was a checklist. Kind of a checklist of improvement. And I always tell faculty, I like also the quality course teaching and instructional practice scorecard from OLC. And I always tell faculty it's 97 indicators, but just pick one every semester and do that the next semester and just let that be your goal. Because you'll hear me say this several times today, and I think I've already heard Janet say it, this is a long game. We're going to be in this process for a long time. We're never going to be one and done, finished. We've gotten the best perfect course and moved on. We're always going to be looking for ways to improve. In her research, she did recommend that we have checkpoints along the way in the use of a rubric, instead of just having a faculty start and use it all at once and then try to figure out where they are, just to try to check in with them along the way. So I really thought that was really interesting, and I would be using that now to get other faculty to buy in.
Oh, thanks for sharing that research. That's great. And your perspectives as well. I did have one follow-up question related to this one around thinking about, you talk about champions, which are so important, as you both indicate, for sort of spreading the word and getting other instructors interested in the process. And I'm wondering about that sort of the stragglers, right? The ones who may need the most help in their courses, but are very reluctant, even with, having peers giving a little bit of pressure on them. How do you get those folks? Enchiladas sounds like the one way to go. I'm sure there are other foods, but are there any other kinds of strategies? I know that's a tough question, but there's that pocket that it's just really hard to get to.
Well, we did use, you said peer. We tried to be very strategic in making sure that faculty that were very impactful in their college or in their department. There's some that are just more impactful than others and have a lot of influence on especially the junior faculty. And so we tried to get them to spend time with the newer faculty that were trying to do this, or faculty that were resistant. I remember I had a professor in the College of Business, and he was already 70, but he was retired from industry. He was a favorite in the classroom, and he had taught two-way interactive video for us. We had some agreements with some companies in the Dallas area, but so I said, well, would you be interested in teaching online? He said, sure. Can I get a typist? I said, no, you can't. Well, he's a two-fingered typist, and he went on to develop 3 different courses with us. But he was like the patriarch in the College of Business. And because he was 70 and went on and had a successful experience and had a very, very intentionally designed quality course, he went on and was an influencer and helped convert to the point that all of the College of Business began to teach online.
So I would say for us, for folks who were more reluctant to participate, we did a couple of things. One is we created course design templates that could just be loaded into the LMS shell that already met a lot of the checkpoints on really any of the popular rubrics that are used, so that we could just build it in. So it was just plug and play. They didn't have to think a whole lot about it. And that simplified their life. So any solution that works on your campus that you can sell to faculty as this will save you time. Sometimes calling it out as part of a quality assurance initiative is not the most useful thing to do. It's, hey, I have a way to save you time. Are you interested in hearing about that? Because a lot of times sometimes our reluctant folks are they're reluctant because they're the most busy, and they have a lot of commitments. And on the other side of that, sometimes it required matching them up with the right instructional designer. We are fortunate that we have a pretty good sized team of instructional designers. So matching them up personality wise with an instructional designer who would be able to work with them and work through their hesitancies and anything that they were concerned about to get past that. And then, for the folks that just were not interested in getting on board, we ultimately just said, hey, we're here to help. Had a smile on our face, but it's not our job to make everybody play in our sandbox, that is ultimately whoever they report to, that's their job. And so we just didn't kind of get over invested in folks that were just not willing to come to the table with us.
Yeah. Thank you for answering that follow-up, because I think that both of those answers had very sagely advice. You know, this idea of taking someone who might be very reluctant or, you know, just feel a little bit uncomfortable with that process, and then turning them into the champion that would then sort of affect the rest. That's what you're talking about, okay? And then providing a toolkit that will help them and framing it. I think that's what's really important about what you were talking about, Janet, in terms of framing it. This is going to save you time. I would say something you also said, Janet, that I think is a great takeaway is related to this sense that when you are providing feedback, you get a good example, right? And we crave good examples, or examples in general of what doesn't really work super well. And then we can make adjustments from there. And I think that is really important. And I would add one other thing, which would be that criticism, and not that that's part of this process, but really looking at what you're doing and saying, I'm not doing this well, is just hard for people to do in general. Mm-hmm. And so that reluctance may not be, it could just be related to like, oh, if I'm looking too closely at, I just kind of want to do what I'm doing. But I think really it comes down to that framing and why it's important. So super, thank you very much. Caitlin, what's our next question? So this one has to do with that quick pivot. So how can institutions address the residual issues of online course quality that persist from the quick pivot to emergency remote instruction? And particularly this is related to the thought that, hey, I did it in 2020 and 2021. I've taught online. I can do this. I don't really have to worry about, you know, improving the quality. How do you address that group? Kay, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'd be surprised if the majority of faculty felt that they did it very well, having to pivot so quickly. So the first thing I do is, and I've already started doing this, is reminding faculty that that was remote instruction. That was a quick remote, do it fast, get it on there. And a lot of faculty didn't have any kind of support or very little support to be able to do that. So I remind them that that was remote instruction, but what we've been doing now for over 20 years is intentionally teaching online with quality, but that takes time and effort in a process of being able to develop those materials and be well trained and really intentional in what you're trying to do and accomplish with the students, and not having to throw it together as the plane is flying, right? Not having to build the plane as it flies. And so I just would say that this actually even shows even further why we need to use a course quality rubric and take the time to go through and be very careful in the development of our materials and make sure that it is achieving our learning outcomes.
Thank you, Kay.
So we see similar things, but also that the techniques that our faculty were using in going to emergency remote instruction were largely synchronous sessions, and then sort of just a quick posting of things into our LMS. So how we're addressing the residual issues, in some ways, a lot of those pieces that we would not necessarily want to see in our online instruction have already gone away as we have returned to in-campus, on-campus learning for those face-to-face classes. What it has done is given a renewed interest in how to teach and design online courses. And so we are going into the fall looking to capitalize on that interest, because people don't want to be in that situation again. They're pretty intrinsically motivated at this point to maybe learn some things that they just didn't have the motivation to learn before. They didn't see the need, they didn't have the reasons. So we don't want to let a emergency, a good crisis go to waste, as everyone says. And so we're just working to meet people where they are and then continue to move them forward to the next step. We're always just kind of focused on like, okay, here you are at point A, let's get you to point B, and then reassess your goals and your ability in this moment to move to point C, and so on.
Thanks. Yeah. Meeting them where they're at and feeling like there is, I think, more of an appetite now. I think that's wonderful for that professional development and course quality. We didn't do it well, so we want to do it better. And I think that's great. So Janet, you had mentioned that your campus has kind of been moving back towards more face-to-face and probably more of an asynchronous model. I imagine there are institutions out there who are continuing to do a lot of synchronous teaching, and a lot of the rubrics and evaluation instruments that are out there do not address that element specifically. So I'm wondering, both of you, either of you, what advice you might have for helping for institutions to help along those lines with the more of the synchronous online element, and maybe more generally about not just the course design piece of a rubric, but also the that facilitation part, whether that's synchronous or asynchronous. It's a lot out there. So
well, I can talk a little bit about the facilitation. The quality course teaching instructional practice scorecard, the quick tip that OLC has, actually there's 97 indicators, but part of those indicators are based on course quality and course design. And then the other, I forget the exact number, it's about half and half, are specifically about online pedagogy. And I don't know of another scorecard or rubric out there that's very clearly delineates what we need to be doing as faculty in the online classroom, making sure that we're building learning community, making sure that we're providing feedback, making sure that we are, at least providing, if we're not doing everything asynchronous, providing some kind of video, letting them hear our voice, hear the passion in our voice for our discipline, right? Because they would hear that in the traditional classroom. But it's really important that faculty be trained in that pedagogy, that shift that we have to make from that traditional classroom. And I really do. Since '98, I always told faculty, you're literally going to take a different mantle, you're just going to shift. You're going to take this off from the classroom. You're going to be in the online classroom. Some of the things that you do in the traditional classroom are going to work, but there's other things that you're going to have to really think about, such as telling a joke. I had a professor type out a joke one time and some students were offended. Well, he left out a couple of words in the joke. So, but he was a jokester, and in the classroom, that's what he did. But I think that, that's a really important piece. And I think that sometimes as institutions, we forget that we need to carry the training on past the course development piece into the actual teaching piece.
Yeah, agreed. This part can be, in some ways, the approach is not different than for course design. As Kay mentioned, there are rubrics out there that can function as very simple tools that are checklists, or you can sort of do the deep dive into them where they really have a lot of richness in sort of the annotations, the commentary, and the examples that they give that are sort of behind that checklist piece. We sometimes think about course design and then the teaching or the facilitation part as being these sort of two separate blocks that happen, but the reality is there's sort of a back and forth road between them. And so to think that you can just do course design or just learn about how to teach online, you really can't do them in isolation, and you're better served to just sort of find those crossover points and address them with faculty as they go. And also to talk with them about, to to take the time to talk with faculty and learn about what it is in their teaching style that they want to maintain, right? The jokester, like what is the thing that they want to make sure comes through? Because a lot of times what we see about folks who have been voluntold to teach online and don't really want to is they miss the relational piece, right? Or they miss the whatever it is that has kept them teaching. They feel like they're going to lose it. And so to help them find ways to make sure that that is still captured in their online courses is a great way to keep them engaged and to address quality.
Those are great answers to that question. I mean, thinking about, that jokes are not part of any evaluation instrument I've ever seen, right? Or like,
They should be.
They should be, exactly. But yeah, how do you bring yourself? I know instructor presence is often on these types of things, but yeah, how do you make that your own as an instructor? And like you say, Janet, really thinking about in terms of those evaluation instruments, ensuring that both the design and facilitation, they go together. Are they sort of, are they communicated on those kinds of rubrics? And one other thing that you had kind of both mentioned, Kay, you started this out, is really thinking about, well, if you're looking at a rubric and maybe it doesn't address the synchronous element, but at the same time, a lot of those same principles apply. You don't want to lecture to your students for 90 minutes in a Zoom session, just like you wouldn't do a 90-minute recorded video asynchronously or that kind of thing. So those principles still apply. It's a matter of being able to maybe communicate and adapt those. So thank you so much for that. Can we go to question 4, Caitlin, please? All right. So then here's a question. How will an institution know when their online course quality initiative is successful? And I think this depends a lot, too, on how much the campus or a department is investing both time and resources. They're going to want to know, is there a return on investment? So I think we're at you starting off, Janet.
So I don't mind starting off, but I almost want Kay to start off on this one because
Okay.
she has been doing this longer. And
Yeah.
so I would like to hear her perspective first, because my time's a little bit shorter.
Okay, please, if you don't mind.
No, that's great. Thanks, Janet. So, well, I have a really easy answer, and Karen from HLC will appreciate this. Your learning outcomes need to be measured, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the things it's going to show, and hopefully it's going to show an improvement. If you've measured before you implemented a rubric, hopefully you're going to see an improvement in course learning outcomes after you were intentionally went through and made sure that you have the outcomes and the activities aligned. I've been teaching online for a long time, and even I have, though, fallen into the trap sometimes of bolting something on because I heard about it at a conference and heard how successful an instructor was about it. So I went back and put it in my course and was so happy about it. And then I went back at the end of the course and looked and was getting ready for the next time I taught it. And I realized it didn't even match up to any of my learning outcomes. It was just a bell and whistle that I hadn't even bothered to check and make sure that it was in alignment. And so maybe it helped build some learning community. I don't know, but it definitely, I don't think, improved my outcomes. So we have to be measuring this. So find out faculty satisfaction with it. Find out instructional designer satisfaction with it. Measure that. I did lots of satisfaction surveys along the way, trying to get the temperature of my faculty and what, if we were doing things right, if we were helping them, if this rubric was helping them, pull a few in and get some reflections from them. Like my student that did the study, I mean, it's valuable information. Feedback is very good, whether it's bad feedback, it's negative or positive, it really is a good thing. So we can use it to improve upon.
Thanks, Kate.
So anecdotally, and I'm going to say this even though we're recording, this will live on in perpetuity, but for me, one of the ways that I knew our online course quality initiative, which is quite young in comparison to how old the institution is, was successful is when instructional designers told me that nobody was fighting them on writing learning outcomes anymore. That we had really sort of crossed the first barrier that I encountered when we started, which was, why do I need a learning outcome? And I was like, oh no, like, okay, that's where we're starting from, meet them where they're at. And once I knew that was successful, then we put in place, our next goal was around engagement and instructor presence and being able to move to the next thing. So absolutely, to Kay's point about satisfaction, reaching out and finding out via surveys, anecdotal evidence, how many people you're training on the rubric. But also, like, when you pass, you know, we're an HLC institution that is our accrediting body, and you know, we passed, so that's how I know it was successful, because we met all of the you know, pieces, or we're showing progress in the areas, right? And said, hey, we have a plan. And I think that's the other thing too, that my my associate vice provost really talked with me a lot about when we were first beginning things in 2015 or so, was that it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to show that you have a framework. So sometimes aiming for perfection really is not productive, but instead working on building a strong foundation and then a sustainable and scalable framework on top of that. Whatever rubric you choose, or whatever professional development model you end up going with, making sure that it's foundationally solid, the framework makes sense in your context, and that it is both sustainable. Like, let's say you leave, can somebody carry on your work? And is it scalable as your program hopefully grows and more people want in on what you're doing?
Yeah, thanks, Janet. And you had just mentioned professional development. I wonder if you both could speak to, okay, you decide upon some sort of instrument or some approach. What professional development opportunities do you provide to train up instructors and potential reviewers along these lines, if this is within your role and you can speak to this?
So we do, since we use the Quality Matters rubric, we do offer several of their workshops that we're allowed to offer as part of our membership that we pay. So we do that. We also have, mostly we do asynchronous LMS-based professional development in my office, but there's plenty of, there's other folks on campus that are doing things a little bit differently. And within my current role in our office, it's more narrowly focused on the course design and the reviewer training piece. Kay, what about where you're at or in your experience?
Same thing. A lot of it came out of my office, and with my at the time, at the very beginning, I didn't have degreed instructional designers. I had what we call course developers. They were all people getting their master's degree, and but they were there to support the faculty. And so just sitting down one-on-one, working through it with them, taking the time to be very personable about it, and really helping, you know, this is a practice that all instructional designers know is important, is to create that working relationship with that subject matter expert, because they're intimidated. They're a little uncomfortable because this is new and they're used to being, you know, the tried and true expert in this field. And all of a sudden now you're throwing all this other stuff at them, and now they're a little uncomfortable. And so, you know, they don't want to look silly in front of their students. So they're a little worried about that sometimes. So I think just taking that time to work with them, the quality course teaching instructional practice scorecard that I mentioned, I'm actually doing a workshop on that in May through OLC that you can take, or you can pay for faculty to take. And I think, you know, as much as I did in-house, I always tried look for other opportunities, because sometimes when you get other experts, presenting the content, even though it's the same content you've been saying over and over, it seems to go over a little better.
Yeah, thanks, Kay, and thank you for leading that workshop. And I think another advantage of that, some of the, off campus or outside the institution kinds of trainings also is you can get multiple perspectives from folks at other institutions and get a little bit of a broader idea along these lines. And I think that one of the big takeaways of this question was really learning objectives, right? Learning outcomes, in ensuring that there's alignment there, and really helping instructors understand how that leads to course quality. So we have 10 minutes left. The Q&A area hasn't been very active, but we still have some time for y'all to ask questions. We do have one more sort of kind of final-ish question that we have here coming up. And this is sort of, what's the most salient piece of advice you can share regarding online course quality initiatives? It's kind of unfair. You've already given so much to us, but if there is sort of a key piece that you haven't mentioned, or you feel like, hey, what's the one thing you can do, or what's a very important thing you can do as part of this course quality initiative? So, Kay, do you want to?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, right, everything that we've both, Jen and I've been saying, hopefully you see as good advice. We both have walked the walk, right? And if for those of you that are in that position, I would suggest to you, just like I do to my doctoral students, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. And that is a very trite saying, right? But it is so true. Yeah. You just need to keep chipping away at this. And that's what HLC and all of our accreditors want. They want to see that we are on this continuous improvement process, that we're always working towards it. So they know that we're not going to get 100% of faculty doing everything all at once that we need them to do, but showing that we have this intentional process in place, that we've got a plan and we're working that plan, and that we are making sure that we are providing professional development for our faculty in these quality initiatives, and just encouraging the faculty and letting them know that, I think it's really important that I taught online at the same time as they did. So when I made mistakes or I had something come up, I was able to share it with them. I think that, let them know that I wasn't just the expert, but I was struggling just like them and trying to figure it out, but committed to doing it with quality, committed to doing it because my students are worth it and my institution is worth it. And in today's competitive field now, where everybody is offering online classes and we have all these different price points, I really am committed to doing it well, because I want my institution to survive and go a long way and make a difference in students' lives. And so I'm committed to teaching online with quality. And right now, that's what I teach in a fully online doctoral program. And my course has never arrived. It will never be perfect. Every semester, I figure out one more thing I could have done better, or two more things, or whatever. I'm always working on my rubric for assessment. I tend to see that I messed up on, one statement, and it's not really messed up, but I wasn't clear in something. And so I think it's really important that we show anybody that we're doing this, that we're doing the same thing, that we're on this continuous improvement process. I always tell my faculty, when after you teach a course for the first time, or after you've made changes, keep a spiral right by your computer and take notes throughout the course on what worked well and what didn't work well, and make sure you write really good notes on what didn't work well.
I would say so it's kind of life coachy advice, but honestly, don't be discouraged by the small wins. Like, the small wins are wins. You know where you want to go in quality. If you're leading these initiatives, you probably have a big vision, and every stop along the way, be it in sort of your roadmap or with an individual faculty member, every step towards that bigger goal is a win, even the small ones. And so don't be discouraged if everybody is not on board right away. Just there's a little bit of, you've got to have some relentless positivity around quality assurance and continuous improvement. Show up with enchiladas and a smile, and it goes a really long way to getting folks on board.
It's right, Jen. I'm glad you said that, because I remember, you can ask my husband. I remember there were some days I went home in tears.
Yeah.
I just felt beat up because I felt like I was the only voice in the wilderness, saying these things, and that nobody was listening. But just look for that evidence. Just like Janet said, look for the small wins, because those small wins add up to the big wins.
They do. And to Karen's question in the chat about what evidence would you post as part of the evaluation completed by HLC or others, we would post our rubrics. We would post evidence of the templates that we used in our LMS. I'm trying to think what else we pulled together.
Probably your training agendas, activities that you provided.
Yep, training agendas. We would post our how many, number of courses that had been reviewed, both a raw number and as a percentage of courses we had developed. So some of those facts. Kay, other pieces?
I'm trying to think, because I was really good about creating artifacts. So my faculty satisfaction surveys on all of the training that we provided and on the services that we provided, and getting some faculty to reflect on the process and how it improved their teaching. And that's the bonus part to this, right? We don't sometimes some faculty don't want to really admit it, but other faculty have admitted that this intentional process that we had to take to have a quality online course has better improved their teaching in the traditional classroom, because now their courses are better designed for the traditional classroom. Yeah. Like you said earlier about, what is a learning outcome? I was shocked when I got to higher ed, because I started out in K-12. I was shocked at how many faculty didn't understand about learning outcomes or learning objectives, and that's where you start, because that's where you start in K-12 and you have to keep all of your records. But how many of them didn't have any training in that and didn't understand it? So that's been the bonus to online learning, is that we had to develop these course materials with quality, and even change some of our pedagogy, and that really went back into the traditional classroom for many.
Yep, I would echo that 100%. People would come out of their Quality Matters trainings that we would do with them, and the instructional design process that they would participate in, and say, oh yeah, I use all of this in my face-to-face instruction too, which is wonderful, because it means that, and that's part of that relentless positivity, is that one instructor that you helped with that one workshop or that one class, they teach a lot of students, and they're in a department that teaches a lot of students, and they have graduate teaching assistants perhaps that they're training. And so you just never know, how big that ripple effect can be. And so if you're feeling discouraged, just remember how large that really can ripple out, and that change takes time. But that it is a worthy goal to work towards these. You work towards 100% quality, and you celebrate every course along the way that gets there.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. I think that's a great sort of sentiment to sort of wrap up here. We're about at the top of the hour, and sounds like maybe Karen, you want to jump on here.
Yeah.
Just want to say thank you both, Janet and Kay. This was a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, I'll echo that too. And what we started out with is exactly what I just want to remind folks about. We expect that our institutions understand how to deliver a distance education in a much different way than they did in spring of 2020. And for the last 2 years, we've been asking institutions to complete this COVID-19 form at the time of the evaluations. We're stopping that as of this September, because we anticipate our institutions aren't just winging it anymore, but this is going to be the new norm of ebbs and flows, of needing to make pretty quick decisions and shifts, not only just for the pandemic, but look at all the natural disasters that have been touching different parts of our country and our institutions. So it's a new way of working, and we expect our institutions will incorporate that into their reviews. So Kay and Janet, thank you so much. Nicole and Dylan, thank you. And Caitlin, as always, you're a great driver of these webinars. So I'll say goodbye to everyone and thanks for joining us again.
Hi, everybody.